This is one of the strange things that happened while I was working at a real estate management company. Because of the nature of my job, I encountered quite a few unbelievable experiences and creepy properties. Among the houses our company managed, every year there would be a few that got labeled as accident properties. One year, one of these properties was the site of a brutal murder. The incident even made the news, so I won't go into the details here. In short, a young woman living alone was killed by a stranger inside the house. I was directly responsible for managing that particular property. It was handled by someone else. With houses like this, if something bad has happened, whether it's suicide, natural death, or an accident, once everything has been settled, the place generally gets rented out again quickly. But since the murder was publicly reported, everyone knew about it. The plan was to leave the house vacant for about a year, let the attention die down, and then put it back on the rental market. During that waiting period, I contacted a friend of mine to see if he wanted to live there. I offered him half the market rent and waived almost all other fees. To my surprise, he agreed immediately. My friend was the type who didn't care about these things at all, didn't believe in ghosts, and even thanked me, saying, "If I can rent at half market price, that's fantastic." At the time, he was considering moving in with his girlfriend, so he planned to use the move as an opportunity to start living together. Of course, he never told her that a woman had been murdered there. They moved in together. Later, my friend told me what happened next. On the very first night, his girlfriend experienced sleep paralysis, what we sometimes call being pressed down by a ghost. She felt completely pinned down, unable to move. Before this, she'd never had a sleep paralysis episode. She told my friend that she always felt like a pair of eyes were watching her inside the house. My friend tried to soothe her, saying it was probably just the anxiety of moving to a new place, it was all in her head. But then, starting on the third day after moving in, his girlfriend began having the same nightmare for 2 nights in a row. In the dream, she was alone in the house when suddenly a strange man broke in. The man chased her relentlessly. Terrified, she ran into the bathroom and woke up there, because she kept having that scary dream. Plus she actually saw inexplicable things like a strange woman appearing inside the bathroom. The stress really got to her. She became somewhat mentally fragile during that time. After about 10 days, they couldn't take it anymore. They moved out. Not long after moving, his girlfriend's mental and physical state completely recovered. But even now, she still doesn't know about the woman who was murdered in that house. Later, after I learned his girlfriend's name from my friend, a chill ran down my spine. Her name was exactly the same as the woman who had been killed in that very house, and they were the same age as well. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But thinking about the fact that during that time, in her dreams, she seemed to be sharing some connection with the murdered woman, it was unsettling. I wondered what might have happened if they had stayed any longer. Afterward, the house was rented out again without issues. Currently, a single man lives there, and he hasn't reported any unusual experiences so far. It seems that even places like this can feel perfectly normal to some people. I've lived in an accident property myself before, but at first, I didn't even know anything had happened there. I lived there quite a while. And yes, some strange things did happen during that time. Back then, I had just moved to a new city, and I was so broke that I could only rent places that nobody else wanted. My attitude was simple: a house is just a roof over my head, a place to sleep. I spent most of my time outside anyway, so as long as the rent was cheap, I didn't care much about anything else. After looking at several places, I suddenly found one that was cheap and in a nice environment, something impossible to find with my budget. I quickly contacted the landlord and went to see it. I was happy with the place, but a nagging question remained in my mind. Why was a house like this, good location, reasonable price, still unoccupied? I didn't ask why. I figured real estate agents just give vague or dishonest reasons. My guess was that maybe it was just far from the train station, so no one wanted to live there. So I signed the contract and moved in. It was only a case of sleep paralysis. I could usually break free by focusing on moving a finger or wiggling a toe, but that night was different. The pressure on my chest felt heavier than ever before, and no matter what I tried, I couldn't move a muscle. Then, the ringing in my ears grew louder, piercing, relentless, though my eyes were closed. I suddenly found myself seeing the room around me clearly, as if my eyelids had been lifted. And there, right beside my pillow, stood a towering man. He was unnaturally tall, almost looming, just standing quietly, doing nothing. But that stillness made him infinitely terrifying. I'd never experienced anything like this before, and my heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. Fear gripped me tightly, pinning me under that terrible weight. In the midst of that tension, unexpectedly, I fell asleep. When morning came, the memory of the night's horror haunted me. Terrified, I called a friend and asked him to come stay over. But that night, the same thing happened to both of us. We were both stuck, helpless, unable to move, and that same giant man appeared at my pillow. After that, my friend was too frightened to come again. One day, I finally met an neighbor who told me something chilling. That apartment had a history. A man had once hanged himself there, and when they found him, his body was already decomposed, collapsed right where I now slept every night. Before me, a few tenants had tried living there, but none stayed long. Strange things happened during my time in the apartment, too. Sometimes, though the room was spotless, a foul stench would suddenly drift in, like the smell of a sewage ditch. Odd as that was, I could somewhat endure it. Then in the summertime, strange stains appeared on the tatami mat, blotches that looked like oily spots. No matter how much I scrubbed, they wouldn't disappear. But when the weather cooled down, they always faded away on their own. Another moment stands out vividly. I had caught a cold and was resting in bed when the ear ringing hit hard again, and my whole body got pinned down like always. I thought, not again. Then I saw it. From the tatami rose a figure, only half his face visible, watching me. Our eyes met directly. I was so scared, I almost lost control. What terrified me most was how I desperately wanted to look away, but I physically couldn't. It was as though my eyes were forced to stay locked on that disgusting face. I blinked furiously, hoping it might break the spell, but no matter how much I tried, I couldn't shift my gaze. That thing just stayed there. Looking back now, the fear isn't as sharp anymore. I lived in that apartment for 3 years, slowly getting used to its strange presence. For someone like me who'd been a skeptic about ghosts, living there changed everything. It was the first truly terrifying experience I had after graduating college and stepping into the city's working world. After university, I decided to join a company in Tokyo and quickly found a place to live. I viewed apartments with my mother and settled on one that cost 50,000 yen a month. The building was about 10 years old and even had a balcony. It felt like a good deal better than other places I saw. The realtor assured me it wasn't any kind of haunted or stigmatized property, so I signed the contract and moved in without hesitation. Work soon became steady. To keep life interesting, I picked up various hobbies: cooking, photography, guitar. I threw myself into all these pursuits, often maxing out my credit cards. Of course, I couldn't tell my parents about my spending sprees, so I'd find excuses to get money from them when I ran out. This went on for over a year, though I was advancing in my career and gaining seniority. Money was tight. I hated the idea of lowering my living standards, but at the same time, I didn't know how to stop the cycle of overspending and debt. Then, during those difficult days, the strange phenomena began appearing seemingly out of nowhere. One night, around 2 or 3 in the morning, I woke up suddenly only to realize my body was utterly paralyzed, trapped in that terrifying state known as ghost pressure bed. To be honest, I'd experienced sleep paralysis many times before and learned tricks to break free. Usually, focusing on moving a finger or a toe was enough to escape. But this time, when the feeling of being paralyzed comes from lack of sleep or overwhelming stress, there's usually a way out, some small part of your body, maybe an arm or your head if you manage to move it even a little. The paralysis breaks, and you're free. But when it's the ghostly kind of paralysis, the so-called sleep paralysis caused by supernatural forces, there's no clear escape method. Usually, at the worst moment, your body will suddenly snap free on its own. This time, there was no doubt it was that bone-piercing chilling ghost pressure again. My whole body was utterly frozen. Only my eyes could move. I relied on every sound to understand what was happening around me. From outside, I heard someone walking up the stairs, then footsteps crossing the corridor, heading toward my rented room. Then came a presence-safe feeling, really, that hovered just outside my door. It was an instinctive sense, familiar and awful. I realized instinctively it was the same kind of terrifying supernatural thing I'd encountered back in my student days. In my mind, I begged silently, please, spare me. I hadn't even had time to think further when I suddenly heard the eerie presence violently trying to open the door. It was wildly turning the locked door up. Trapped and frozen, all I could feel was my heart racing inside my chest. Then, abruptly, the noises stopped. At the same time, that presence moved from the entryway closer, right up to the sliding door of my bedroom. Terrified, I rotated my only free part, my eyes, toward the sliding door. I saw a gap about 5 centimeters wide. I've always been fascinated by the supernatural and have plenty of experience with strange phenomena. But in moments of real fear, I'm no hero. I surrendered to the dread inside me, praying aloud, please don't come in. Please, don't come in. Even though I was scared stiff, my eyes couldn't leave the gap. Then I saw a black mist shaped vaguely like a person opening the sliding door and moving fast into the room. It came right to my feet and stopped. I couldn't make out its face, his or hers. Nothing, just standing there, staring at me. I was nearly losing my mind. After a while, the thing turned and walked straight toward the balcony doors made of glass. The moment it left the room, my body released from the paralysis. In a splash of cold sweat, I shot upright in bed. I looked at the sliding door. It was just as before. The gap closed down to 5 centimeters again. I stared at that narrow slit, thinking about all the ghost shows where similar things happened. Fear pricked at me, but because nothing had actually harmed me, I calmed down fairly quickly and buried myself back under the covers. Before falling asleep, I convinced myself that everything that had just happened was a dream. But no sooner had I drifted to sleep, I was jolted awake again. The exact same situation recurred. I felt that presence slowly climbing the stairs outside, crossing the corridor, and messing with my door handle, the same clumsy twisting sounds. Honestly, at that moment, I had no explanation for why. But this time an even stronger wave of fear crashed over me. Then a fleeting thought flashed in my head. Would it, like last time, just stare at me without doing any harm and leave? What if I could clearly see the true face of that shadowy figure? Before I could ponder further, the mysterious black mist minus shape slipped through the gap and into my room again. My body, still firmly paralyzed, confined me, but with only my eyes free. I scanned around and saw the sliding door open just as before. Its 5 centimeter gap widened. The intruder pushed the door fully open and stepped into the room, coming to a stop by my feet once more. But this time, the dark fog shape sharpened into a clearer form. It was a woman with long black hair flowing down past her waist. Her face was hidden, but I could feel her fierce gaze locked on me. Just as I thought she was about to leave through the balcony again, she grabbed my ankle and began shaking my body. From her mouth came words I could unmistakably hear: "Give me back my money. Give me back my money." Despite the clarity of the voice, all I felt was terror, no courage, no clarity, nothing but the desperate urge to break free from these invisible chains. Mustering every ounce of strength, I summoned the willpower to sit up with fierce momentum, and suddenly the paralysis dissolved. I collapsed with a thud off the side of the bed. Scrambling to get away, I looked up and the woman was gone. A wave of relief washed over me along with my terror. I glanced at the sliding door once again. It had closed to the narrow 5-centimeter gap. Later, I went to the entrance to double-check that the door locks were all secured. Then I made sure the bedroom door was shut tight. No gaps anywhere. Crawling back under the covers, I closed my eyes only to be hit by a sudden chill. I quickly opened them and looked around again. That's when I noticed the glass door leading to the balcony was cracked open. Just a tiny sliver. I was certain I had already checked everything thoroughly: doors, windows, all sealed, but I was too scared to get up and close that gap. So, I just buried my head deeper under the blanket and eventually fell asleep. That night, the woman didn't show up again. But the next morning, the moment I got out of bed, I felt a sharp pain in my ankle, as if I had sprained it. There was no visible bruising or swelling though, so I was sure what happened last night wasn't a dream. It really happened. From then on, I made it a point to always check every door and window before going to bed. But just a few days after that incident, a thought suddenly struck me. The woman had kept repeating something about repaying a debt. I asked myself, do I owe money to someone? That's when I realized. Ever since moving to Tokyo, I'd spent a lot on hobbies and entertainment, even borrowing quite a bit from my parents. That moment marked a turning point. The turning point. I began to seriously change my lifestyle. When I went home for the new year, I told my parents about the supernatural thing that happened in my rental apartment. My dad scolded me harshly, telling me to focus on work and stop wasting time on nonsense. But I wasn't surprised. My father's job often involved dealing with dead bodies, so he didn't believe in ghosts at all. My mother, on the other hand, was more concerned. She bought me some bath salt with protective properties, and when I returned to Tokyo, I immediately stuck it up by the entrance. To this day, I still live in that same apartment. I haven't encountered any more supernatural occurrences, even though I never quite figured out what that ghost really was. Strangely enough, I'm grateful to it. Because of that ghost, I changed my views about money, and my life became more stable. This is my story from working in the real estate rental business. There are many so-called accident properties in rentals, places where incidents or tragedies have happened. In those cases, you have to tell the next tenant. Things like lonely deaths or suicides classify the place as an accident property. Usually, you only inform the very next tenant, not the one after that. Since I seem sensitive to these supernatural vibes, the company has given me special treatment. I'm not allowed to handle or visit those accident properties. But one day, my supervisor called me. He asked if I could show a client a property near a certain station in Kyu Prefecture. He told me to just wait outside and not go inside because it was a known accident property. Can you do that? I asked for details and learned that the client had phoned the office wanting to see this apartment. But my supervisor was out meeting landlords and checking new buildings. He told the client they were all busy and should come another day, but the client insisted on seeing it right then and was already waiting in front of the apartment. My supervisor had tried calling others, but everyone else was busy with clients, so he ended up asking me. Once I knew the situation, I headed straight to the site, taking a train from Apprehension. On the train, I felt uneasy, wondering what had happened in that building. My supervisor had told the client it would take over an hour for someone to get there, but the client simply didn't care. I guess this meant he wanted to close a deal quickly. Somehow, that made me optimistic. Maybe this contract would go through fast. Arriving near the apartment, I held a map and walked about 3 minutes from the station. It was a 2-story wooden building with a loft, in a pretty good location. Standing outside the apartment was a man who looked to be in his 30s. I greeted him, and he seemed very glad I'd come. "Thank you for rushing over. Let me take a look inside." So I opened the door and let him go in alone. I stayed outside waiting. Suddenly, I heard him laughing from inside. "This is a very nice place, you should come in and see it too." I firmly refused. But then he came out, grabbed my arm, and tried to pull me inside by force. I remembered my supervisor's frequent warnings more than accident properties. Be especially careful never to go inside with male clients alone. Many women have been assaulted in those situations. I'd noticed that too at the time. Given how that male client looked, I was worried about being assaulted, so I kept backing away. But the man kept pulling me inside. Once he saw I'd made it into the entryway, though, he walked deeper into the apartment himself, keeping his distance from me. I stood there at the entrance, looking around. Even though it was a first-floor unit, the ceiling was high. It was a 10-MS matte studio with beautiful wallpaper. Personally, I thought the place suited a woman more than a man. The male client stood in the back, looking out the window. I took a look around the interior as well. When I glanced up at the loft area, I gasped and held my breath. There on the wall was an enormous woman's face. Her eyes were wide open, her mouth half-as parted. It was a terrifying image. I must have stood there with my mouth hanging open, staring at that picture in shock. The male client was suddenly standing beside me. He said to me, "So you can see it too." Then he smiled faintly and walked away. I turned to look at the wall again, but the picture that had been there was gone. Seeing this, I nervously hurried out of there. The male client had already reached the entryway, preparing to leave. Just as I was about to rush after him, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the steel pipe by the loft. Something seemed to be hanging from it, swaying. Terrified, I rushed to the entryway. I didn't even put my shoes on properly, I just stepped into them and ran outside. Once outside, I saw the man standing there, stretching with a big yawn. I approached him, about to speak, when he bowed deeply to me and said, "Thank you so much for coming all this way today. I really appreciate it." Then he left me standing there speechless and walked briskly away. I hurriedly locked the door and chased after him. The man said, "I have other properties I want to see, so I'll leave it at that." Then he walked off in the opposite direction from the station. When I got back to the office, I reported the situation to my supervisor. My supervisor gave a bitter smile and said, "No contract signed, huh? But that guy was definitely suspicious." Later, I found out what had happened in that apartment. A few years ago, a young woman had used a rope to hang herself from the steel pipe in the loft. Since then, people had moved in from time to time, but they all moved out short period. What made me most curious, though, was that the male client could see the same things in that apartment as I could. But after seeing what was in that room, he'd smiled. I found that very strange and eerie. I wondered if there was some odd purpose behind the man insisting I go inside to look. That day I met up with college friends who'd moved to Tokyo. Since basically everyone had moved at least once, we got to talking about apartment hunting. Someone suddenly brought up strange stories about stigmatized properties, which reminded me of a frightening place I'd seen when I first came to Tokyo. It was about a 5-minute walk from Ikebukuro station, and the rent was only 50,000 yen. Maybe they had a duty to inform the next tenant. The real estate agent told me plainly that it was an incident property. A Chinese person had moved in a month earlier. Of course, that person was gone now, but the bloodstains had been cleaned up thoroughly. The agent took me to see the place. Just as he'd said, it was clean, but the atmosphere inside the room was exceptionally bad. And there was something bizarre about the apartment. The only window in the place opened onto a wall. I found that completely incomprehensible, so I decisively gave up on that apartment. Because I'd had those experiences, I became very interested when other people talked about living in or viewing stigmatized properties. After listening to some stories my classmates told, one friend suddenly spoke up. When I was apartment hunting for my recent move, I saw a really incredible property for that area. It was huge, but the rent was unusually cheap. So I told the agent I wanted to see it. The agent serving him didn't even think about it. He flatly refused. He told my friend that he absolutely didn't recommend that apartment because the actually usable space was very small. Hearing that explanation, my friend figured the place must be really bad. But he had a let's minus a minus look attitude. So he told the agent that if possible, he'd still like to go see it. Maybe he could accept it. Maybe he'd rent it. After hearing this, the agent showed an expression of weary resignation, like he'd heard it all many times before. Then he reluctantly agreed. At that moment, his friend realized from his reaction that many people probably gave up after seeing the place, though he had also thought about just quitting and not going to see it. He figured maybe the house wasn't such a big deal after all, so he finally agreed to check it out. They decided to first look at some other properties he liked before circling back to that fated one. When they arrived, he glanced at the floor plan before stepping inside. It was a spacious place, around 36 square meters, a decent size. Yet, in Tokyo, the rent was under 40 yen, exceptionally cheap. According to the plan, right after you enter, there's a straight corridor. On the right side of the hallway were the bathroom and toilet. Further ahead, on the left, was a sliding door leading to one room. Moving forward again was the living room combined with the kitchen. Turning left from there lead to a hallway passage with a door on the left side of that passage. That door and the sliding door along the corridor both connected to the same room. At the end of the passage was another room, the one with two sliding doors. Surrounded by both the corridor and the passage was the largest space in the apartment. But the realtor told him that particular room was off limits. It couldn't be opened or used. So practically, only about half the space in the apartment was available. They went inside to take a closer look. The friend felt the house was oddly dim inside. The walls and wallpaper were supposed to be white, but the air itself carried a deep, dark brownish hue, thick and oppressive. After showing him around the entire place, the realtor said he wanted to show that problematic room. He warned his friend the door really shouldn't be opened, but since they had to know what was inside, this would be the last time anyone opened it if the friend planned to live there. Then, the realtor slid open the door. Inside was a tatami room. The friend immediately felt a strange, eerie energy burst from inside. The atmosphere suddenly thickened, heavy with tension. Just as the friend was about to step inside, the realtor sharply interrupted. "Sorry, please don't go in. You can just look from here. And please, don't look at the Butsudan." Even after being told that, out of the corner of his eye, the friend caught a glimpse of a black Butsudan standing in the left corner of the room. The moment he saw it, a chill ran through him and an unpleasant sweat broke out on his face. He couldn't imagine how terrifying it must be to stay inside alone. Later, the realtor explained that opening the door like this was unavoidable. He said most people who saw the room abandoned and it immediately once they stepped inside, even more so after seeing the Butsudan. That was why the realtor had to open the door to let potential tenants see for themselves. But it was almost guaranteed to scare them off. The friend thought to himself that this apartment was definitely a lost cause. Back in the car, after leaving the place, the usually calm realtor suddenly blurted out, That property is extremely dangerous. You could die there. He went on,